Al Jazeera's The Labour Files shines a light on much of the sabotage that Jeremy Corbyn and Labour Party members were subjected to between the years of 2015 and 2019. An episode released over the weekend focused on the flaws in a Panorama episode, Is Labour Anti-Semitic? It was very, very influential at the time, hosted by John Ware, and it involved interviews with lots and lots of former Labour Party staff, nearly all of whom were aligned with factions opposed to Jeremy Corbyn. John Ware didn't really look into that, didn't question what motives people might have for giving what evidence to him. And it turns out some of that testimony is less than trustworthy. Let's take a look at this clip from The Labour Files.
A description of Marks and Bird's disciplinary interview features in the documentary. The interview is conducted by Ben Westerman, a party official who is Jewish.
Harassment generally.
Ben Westerman received dozens of complaints. While interviewing one member, he was confronted with the very anti-Semitism he'd been investigating.
And we finished the interview. The person got up to leave the room and then turned back to me and said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "What do you mean, where am I from?" And she said, "I asked you, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm not prepared to discuss this." And they said, "Are you from Israel?" What can you say to that? You are assumed to be in cahoots with the Israeli government. It's this obsession with that just spills over all the time into anti-Semitism.
Rika Bird speaks to Westerman at the end of the interview.
When he says, where are you from? Are you from Israel? That's an absolute lie. I didn't say that.
With Westerman's permission, the two women record the interview.
The full recording shows what actually did happen.
Curious because I haven't been in the Labour Party very long and I've certainly never been to anything like this informal interview before. So I'm just curious about like what branch are you in?
I don't think that's relevant.
Okay.
I hope that's okay. I'm sorry, I don't think where I'm from is at all relevant to the investigation.
I did ask Westerman, what branch are you from? Meaning what branch of the Labour Party, because it was a Labour Party internal investigation. The word Israel never came into the exchange between me and Westerman.
So the testimony given to John Ware and broadcast uncritically was that an activist had asked, was he from Israel? Now, that would be a very strange question to ask someone who's conducting an investigation. And I think, that probably would be anti-Semitic. Are you from Israel? Why are you asking him that? But it seems like it didn't happen. So there is a recording of that conversation. And she said, what branch are you from? Very, very different. And it's worth noting, this wasn't a mystery at the time. In fact, the Canary reported after the release of that documentary that recording was in existence. There was a recording that put extreme doubt on the testimony given to John Ware. That wasn't the only bit of information that was in the public domain at the time that put doubt on the John Ware documentary. Let's take a look at another clip from the Labour Files.
Mr. Corbyn and his office have repeatedly said that when party members are accused of anti-Semitism, they don't interfere in the disciplinary process. Indeed, the Labour Party said any such suggestion is categorically untrue. But that doesn't seem to be the case. In an email, Mr. Corbyn's Director of Communications, Seamus Milne, asked for a review of the disciplinary process into anti-Semitic complaints. There was a risk, he said, of muddling up political disputes with racism. How did you interpret that email from Mr. Milne?
The same way that all staff in Labour's head office did, which is that this was the leader's office requesting to be involved directly in the disciplinary process.
Our investigation finds that Communications Director Seamus Milne is specifically asked for his view by Emily Oldknow, an executive director who oversees the disputes team. Milne is also referring to a very specific case. James Schneider worked alongside Milne and has the full email that Matthews referred to in the Panorama programme.
It reads, "This member is a Jewish activist, the son of a Holocaust survivor. If we're more than very occasionally using disciplinary action against Jewish members for anti-Semitism, something's going wrong, and we're muddling up political disputes with racism. Quite apart from this specific case, I think going forward, we need to review where and how we're drawing the line if we're going to have clear and defensible processes." So, how this is used is just the red bit. So these 10 words, the great irony is that this is totally correct and is borne out as being totally correct, because the Labour Party has actually, again and again, disciplined Jewish people disproportionately for anti-Semitism because it has been muddling up political disputes with racism, political disputes within the Jewish community.
Again, I remember that full email was sent as a briefing to journalists at the time that documentary was released. I remember actually bringing up how that was taken out of context on radio the following day. And all you would get in response is, why are you apologizing for anti-Semitism? Why are you defending Jeremy Corbyn? You'll defend him, whatever you do. This is Trumpian. Those are two examples of how that was not a particularly good piece of journalism, right? You should be able to critique it. Also, by the way, if you want to critique the Al Jazeera documentary, you're very much free to. But that was not the tone of debate at the time. If you questioned anything that was said in that John Ware documentary, you were persona non grata. Aaron, what do you make of the Al Jazeera documentary, and especially this particular episode 2 in the series, which is focused on that John Ware episode of Panorama?
Well, I think it's a stake through the heart of the reputation of BBC Panorama, Michael. I mean, you have to remember this documentary in 2019, it was made at an incredibly important, volatile moment in British politics. I think really it was the moment for me personally when it was clear that Labour weren't going to form a government under Jeremy Corbyn. You have to remember all the way through 2018, the polling was still very positive. Actually, right until the middle of 2018, very positive. The polling leads were very big. Then going into 2019, struggles. And of course, with the May elections, the European elections, Labour not doing particularly well. Still would often come first in poll, ratings in terms of a Westminster general election. But you had the Brexit Party, the Lib Dems, the Tories. It was a very strange moment. This was like a grenade, Michael, being thrown into the political debate. As a country, we're talking about Brexit, our economic model. And for me, at this moment, having watched the Labour files, it does seem that there was political intent with regards to what the documentary was trying to achieve. That's my read on it. Now, maybe not. I mean, John Ware, as I understand it, hasn't submitted any complaints in regards to this to Al Jazeera. There have not been any legal threats. So presumably he has no issue with it. I mean, again, that may change, but that's the present situation. And again, remember, Michael, in 2019, when this was published, it was nominated for a BAFTA award. That's how good this documentary was meant to be. This was the gold standard documentary at the BBC. And yet we're seeing, actually, when it comes to basic journalistic integrity and quality and professionalism, it was found wanting. Like you say, he's making claims about Labour, about Seamus Milne, about Jeremy Corbyn. No allegedly, no purportedly. He's not corroborating what's being alleged by the people he's talking to with the other side. This is basic professionalism, Michael, that you would expect from Novara Media, but we're not seeing from John Ware at BBC Panorama, and yet it gets nominated for a BAFTA. Finally, we have to remember with these quote-unquote whistleblowers, my goodness, how ridiculous that sounds in retrospect, that the Labour Party ended up paying around £470,000 for their case not to proceed to the courts. That was a decision made by Keir Starmer. That had started before him becoming leader. He promised to put a lid on it and not allow it to go to the courts. And so there was, I believe, £170,000 payout to the whistleblowers themselves, £200,000 to their legal representatives, and I think Labour's own costs are about £100,000. So Keir Starmer swallowed £470,000 of costs for this, of membership money to pay for this. And what we've heard ever since then, and bear in mind, Labour are presently £7 million a year down because they've lost around 200,000 members since early 2020. Well, Corbyn was irresponsible with the finances because, of course, there were all these court cases. The complete opposite is true. Keir Starmer paid the best part of £500,000 to settle a case which plainly seems to have been, at best, a little bit more controversial than he was suggesting, let us say, when it was in the public debate in 2020. The British media took a beating with the Corbyn years, really, in terms of their integrity, their scruples. But this, from the, like I say, the gold standard documentary series, at the BBC, which loves to say it's world class, this, of all things, was actually the worst of the worst. If you're making a huge documentary asking whether a potential party of government is anti-Semitic, if it's racist, that's a huge question of profound public importance. You should do your damnedest to find the truth. The weight of actually proving that should fall on the people making the film. It shouldn't be, we have this hypothesis that you're racists, but by the way, we're not going to go out of our, we're not going to go that extra mile to actually discern whether it's true or not. That's down, to the Labour Party to rebut it. That isn't a documentary. That's a hit job.